Hey everybody, today is going to be a good one. We are going to be doing a smoked pork butt, but we're going to be making it all about taco meat. We'll show you how we go ahead and do that in just a minute. All right, before we get started, let's go ahead and talk about the ingredients and the equipment. I'll start with the equipment. I'm doing this today on our pellet smoker. You could certainly use a pellet smoker, a charcoal grill, a gas grill, or you can do it in your oven. Just pay attention to the temperatures more so than time. That's going to be key to this. So I'm using my PitBoss pellet smoker. I'm going to be using a thermometer probe so I know the temperature of the meat inside of there. I have a 6 3/4 pound bone-in pork butt. It's essentially the shoulder. And I'm going to be using a taco seasoning. Now I chose this just because it's pre-mixed and I was able to buy it in bulk. It was really easy rather than making my own. It is chili pepper, salt, pepper, onion, garlic powder, and cumin, right? So it's a good authentic sort of taco seasoning, if you will. So this is really simple. Let's go ahead and start by getting this unpackaged and prepped. Now I'm just going to go ahead and pat this dry, not wiping it because I don't want to get the fibers from the paper towels on it, but I definitely want to pat it a little bit dry. And the reason is I want the meat to be a little bit moist, but I don't want it to be wet. Once we season it, I want that salt and the seasoning to extract out the moisture and ultimately cause a bit of almost a paste on the outside of it. I'll show you what that looks like after we just let it set for a few minutes. Now we just want to look this over, and if we see a lot of fat on it that we need to trim, we'll go ahead and trim it. We have a little bit on the back here, but frankly it's not too thick, so I'm going to leave this just like it is, and I'm going to cook it fat side down. So if it scorches any of that fat, it's not the actual meat part that gets scorched. It's probably the best way to do it, especially if you have a small grill or a small smoker where this could potentially be directly over the fire pot as opposed to offset. All right, with that, I'm going to start seasoning. I'm just going to go ahead and put a nice coating of this taco seasoning all across the entire top of this. It's okay if it's kind of on here thick. We're going to end up pulling this pork apart anyway, so we'll end up getting a lot of small pieces. Shake this up. The one downside of living in the humid area is these things tend to clump a little bit. Just open that up a bit. Now I like to put my hand down here like this so that I catch any of it that happens to drop on the cutting board, and then as I do, I just pat it up onto the sides of it. Good way to save a little bit of your seasoning or rub. All right, got one side nice and dusted. I'm gonna go ahead and turn it over and go right on the other side. So I mentioned before we pat this dry, and the reason we do is as that salt soaks into this meat, it will begin to extract out some of the moisture from the meat itself. And what that does is it takes that powder and it dampens it. It almost creates, you've heard people talk about a bark that gets cooked on there. This almost creates a paste in place. So as opposed to making a paste and then rubbing it on there, it sort of forms a paste just based on the way it was done. You can see what I meant here right on the top. Like this is almost paste looking. It's still got powder here, but you can see how it's formed that paste on it. So just a couple more minutes and that'll be ready to put a thermometer in and put in the grill. When we start this cook, we want to impart a lot of smoke into that pork. So I'm going ahead and start at a fairly low temperature. I'm going to do 250 degrees. We'll probably do it for about 2 hours until we get close to 150 to 165 degrees. That's going to be what we're shooting for on this. So I've got this preheated. Let's put some probes in the meat and then we'll get it put right in here on the top shelf. So you've probably seen videos before where I reference these meter thermometers. I love these little wireless meters. They're phenomenal. If you're interested in them, I'll put a little link up top. You can go learn more about them. But what's nice about them is you put them into the meat beyond this line and they measure the inside temperature of the meat as well as the ambient temperature in the grill, which allows me to put 2 probes down in this meat, and then I can monitor all of this from my phone and get alarms and everything else. So I'm just going to go ahead and get one of these guys put in here into the nice thick part of this. Almost go straight in with probe number 1, and then we'll do probe number 2. I think we'll do that one over on this side and maybe just below the bone in this case. That one's going to go right there. I now have the ability to measure the temperature at 2 different places inside this meat and 2 different places for ambient temperature. Let's go ahead and put it on the grill. All right, so our pellet hopper is nice and full. I turned on the meter app. It's connected to both of these. I'm just going to open this up and get it placed right on the top shelf here. There we go. With that, we'll close it on down. With the meat in the grill, we're now going to go ahead and set up the meter app. Really simple. I went into it. I'm just going to click on probe number 1, I'm going to click Setup Cook. I'm going to choose pork, roast, choose shoulder. I'm going to lower this temperature. I want to pull this out, let's say somewhere around 155 degrees or so. I'm going to start that cook. I'm now going to go ahead and set the other probe the same way. So we'll go back here to probe number 2, Setup Cook, pork, roast, shoulder. We'll set this one also up to 155. And we'll hit Start Cook. And those two guys are ready to go. I can see right now they're both waiting to estimate the time. It's between 46 and 49 degrees temperature internally in the meat. The target is 155, and it's somewhere between 225 and 242 in the grill, depending on which side. And that just goes to show you, right? There's a 20 degrees temperature difference from the left side to the right side, only about 8 to 10 inches apart from each of those probes. So kind of interesting for sure. Okay, with that, we'll see you guys back here at 155 degrees. So it's about 2.5 hours later. You can kind of see right here, if I pull up my pork shoulder, my internal temperature is set at 157 degrees. The target was 155. Ambient temperature inside the grill is 268. That's on probe 1. Interestingly enough, probe 2 is showing 250 degrees. That's the difference in temperature from one side to the other. But that's also 160 degrees internally. So that is good news. We'll go ahead and get ready to take that out, put it right into a nice little braising pan, along with a bit of chicken stock and some onions and peppers. So first, let's go ahead and just cut up our onions and peppers. And all we're going to do is cut these up into little chunks, 1/4 to 1/2 inch size. It's about the right size for me. Nothing all that fancy here, right? Like, this really is just popping it in the tray. I like to put the vegetables on the bottom. It keeps the meat from sticking directly to the bottom of the pan. I think it's a nice little shelf that it creates and allows some of the braising liquid to get underneath the meat, which frankly I think is a good idea. So I'm doing the same thing with 1/2 bell pepper and 1/2 an onion, mainly just because that's what I had available and already open. I didn't feel like cutting up another onion for another 1/2, so this will be more than enough. And some of the family members don't really care for onions. These pieces will be big enough that they can pick them out if they desire to do so. Same thing here. Drop these right down in our pan. Now I'm going to cheat a little bit. This is a big bouillon cube, so I'm going to cut this thing up a little bit. Just shave it up with a knife. Then I'm going to mix it up with some boiling hot water. When I add braising liquid, I like to heat the braising liquid up so that we don't have a significant change in temperature of the meat itself, right? We're sitting at 165 degrees. I don't want to put a bunch of cold water on it and have it get down to something potentially lower and then have to heat it back up again. So I usually do this where I'll set my boiling water and make my bouillon that way and then just pour it in. So I'm actually going to cheat and just make this right in the pan. You'll see me take this bouillon that I chopped up, sprinkle it right down in there. We'll add some water to this before we go ahead and put our pork butt right in there. I've added a little bit of that boiling water right into this bouillon cube just so it starts to break that down. And now we're going to go ahead and pull our pork butt out. And I've got some heat-proof gloves that I can just pick that pork butt right up and carry it over here using these. If you don't have one of these, don't try this, okay? It's definitely going to be hot. So I'm going to take that pork butt and put it right here on the cutting board. Over here. Yeah, right here. Hey, do me a favor. If you like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more like it, subscribe to the channel and click on that little bell notification so you get notified of new videos. Thanks. Now this is looking really good. I still have both my probes in here, number 1 and number 2. I'm going to leave them in. It doesn't feel completely tender yet, right? But it's got a nice little color on the outside of it. So this is exactly what we want to see. I'm going to take this and we're going to set it right down in our pan. Zoom in and kind of show you what that looks like. Now this looks really good. I have a little bit of that liquid down in the bottom, but I do want to add a bit more in here. So I'm just going to pour some of this boiling water right into that bouillon and maybe get us about an inch and a half deep of water around this. It's going to be more than enough to seal in all of those juices that we're ultimately looking for. Now I'm going to take this probe out and I'm going to put it in through the foil that we wrap this in. So I'm going to kind of keep an eye on exactly this position that it's in. Let's go ahead and wrap this with foil. And again, I like this trick of just taking 2 pieces of foil, lay them right on top of each other, and then fold us about a 1/2 inch seam across that, and then take that seam, fold it in half again. You end up with a nice sealed piece that you can open up and have sort of a full sheet here. So that will be good for this. Make sure we get a nice angled piece on it here. Seal this up all the way around here. And the idea is we really want this to remain sealed up in here. That's the whole purpose of this, is by sealing it up, all of those juices steam up and keep this very, very moist. Now you might have recalled, I pulled this little probe out of here, and I'm going to go ahead and put it right back in and directly into the meat. And that is probe number 1. I will be able to monitor the temperature from the outside of this a little bit easier. So before we put this back in the grill, I'm going to go ahead and set up our temperature thermometers again. I am now going to say set up cook, choose pork shoulder. 203 is the perfect temperature for me here. I'll say start the cook. And then I'm going to do the same thing with probe number 2. We'll set up the cook on this one again, pork shoulder. We'll leave it at 203 degrees and we'll start that cook. We now have probes 1 and 2 ready to go. They'll give me an alarm when it gets to 203 degrees. So with that, let's go ahead and put this guy back into the smoker. All right, get our heat-proof gloves on, open this guy back up, and we're gonna put it right back in this top shelf. That could be problematic. That probe may be touching the top. There we go. Close it up, and we'll see you back here at 203 degrees internal temperature. Probably about another 2 hours or so, but that's the beauty of it. It's gonna ring my alarm on my phone and tell me when it's time, and I can go back inside and do what I'm doing. You may have just heard that alarm. That means my internal temperatures are exactly where I want them. I have one at 202 degrees. It's set for 203. The other one is at 205 degrees, and it is also set for 203. So it's letting me know it is time to go ahead and remove this pork from the heat. So what I'm going to do is take this phone here, put the phone down in my pocket, get my gloves on, and let's pull that pork out. We'll set it right here on the table. We'll go ahead and show you what that looks like. Ooh. Looks like I had a little liquid coming out of here because I could see some moisture on the top of the grill. I'm going to go ahead and turn this guy off. I'm just going to get this loosened up. Boy, you got to be careful. That steam is going to be hot, hot, hot. Put these gloves back on here. And we'll remove. Actually, you know what? Let's zoom in so you can see it at the same time. Well, I'll tell you, the smell is pretty amazing. It smells like taco meat. Now what I want to do is I want to go ahead and take these probes right out of here. That one out. And we'll take this one out. Set them aside. Now this is always a surefire way of knowing if your pork is nice and well cooked. See how it's pulled back from the bone there? I'll tell you, this just looks amazing, and that braising liquid smells so good. Now they always say, you know if it's good and tender. The juice about shot out of there. If you can just pull that bone right out. Now I'm a little surprised. That bone's not pulling out of there as easily as it normally does. Well, yeah, it is. I lied. Just stuck in there, but it pulled out pretty good. It's nice and clean with the exception of this piece right here that didn't pull off of there. That looks pretty darn good, but there you go. Clean bone, pulled right out. We're gonna have to give it a little bit of a taste, and I'll probably start using my little claws here just to break this apart. Oh my gosh, that looks good. Holy Hannah. Wowee. That looks amazing. Let me zoom in and show you what that looks like. I'm trying to do it carefully. I do not want any of it to splash down in that braising liquid and burn the ever-loving snot out of me. You know what? I'm going to take this out of the pan, set it right here on the cutting board, and we'll go ahead and break it up. That is hot. Hot, 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 hot. Before I start breaking all this up, I've got to try a little bit of this. It just looks so good. It's got a beautiful smoke ring around it, nice and pink and red on the outer edge. Man, that is good. Really good smoky flavor, really tender, unbelievably moist. Yeah, that is good. I'm gonna zoom in, show you how we go ahead and pull this apart. I'm just gonna grab a chunk of it and pull it off of there, but that's exactly what we wanna see. Look how that's just breaking apart. That is pulled pork that's tender. I don't know if I wanna pull the whole thing apart. The family might wanna have it some different ways, but we talk about wanting to make a pulled pork sandwich or pulled pork tacos, or you name the pulled pork anything, and there you go. That delicious pulled pork. I love these claws for doing exactly that. Look at that. Same thing, just grab that and start shredding this up. Look at that. That pork right there just pulls right into shreds. Again, have it on anything you wanted. There you go. Try them one more bite. Just unbelievable. Pulled pork nachos, pulled pork sandwich, pork and eggs. Like, you name it, this is going to be absolutely phenomenal. And this will be a meal for, 3 or 4 different meals and or snacks throughout the entire week for the family of 5. Easy to do. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Safe and happy grilling. We'll see you next time. Oh, hey, you guys are still there. Awesome. Hey, don't forget, check out the entire PitBoss Series playlist right here and the entire Blackstone playlist series right there. Thanks, man.